You peel back the lid of a styrofoam noodle cup and burn your thumb on the steam. You stand under white fluorescent light that makes every face look sick. You smell damp carpet, cheap deodorant, and something sweet underneath it all, like burnt sugar melting somewhere inside the walls. You think it is a night shift. You think it is customer support. You think a headset is only a headset until you sit down and notice the desk already has 2 names taped under the monitor, neither of them yours, neither of them real. You place your bag between your shoes. You touch the cracked keyboard. You hear 20 soft voices speaking at once with practiced patience, each voice calm enough to lower someone else's guard. You look toward the glass office at the far end of the room and see a man in a dark shirt laughing into a phone while a gold watch flashes under the light. You sign forms without reading them. You nod through instructions without asking questions. You tell yourself your rent is late, your fridge is empty, and your morals have never paid a bill. You lift the headset. You feel the cushion against your ear. You hear a trainer tell you the first rule in a voice so flat it sounds memorized by pain. You never sell fear. You sell relief. You look around the room again. You notice nobody here looks proud. You notice nobody here looks surprised either. You stir the noodles with a plastic fork and taste salt, cardboard, and shame before your shift even starts. You arrive because you need money. You stay because the people above you know exactly what desperation sounds like. Level 2, the floor. You now sit where panic gets translated into profit. You clock in at dusk and leave after dawn, with your eyes burning from blue light and sleep debt. You badge through a steel door. You pass rows of desks where voices soften, harden, apologize, warn, and reassure on command. You learn the script. You learn the pacing. You learn where to pause so fear can bloom on the other end of the line. You hear your supervisor call it support. You hear the old agents call it the floor. You hear the top closers call it fishing. You keep your head down and learn the culture through what gets rewarded. You see missed quotas punished with humiliation. You see high numbers rewarded with cash envelopes and weekend dinners in places nobody on the floor could afford alone. You make your first clean conversion on the 3rd night. You hear an old man's breathing turn shallow through the headset. You picture nothing. You force yourself to picture nothing. You guide him from confusion to urgency so smoothly that the woman beside you taps your shoulder in approval without even looking up from her own call. You expect to feel powerful. You feel cold instead. You spend your break in a stairwell that smells like old smoke and wet concrete. You count the notes in your first bonus. You tell yourself it is temporary. You tell yourself 1 month of this will fix things. You tell yourself people lie to themselves every day and still sleep fine. You look through the glass at the man upstairs. You see polished shoes. You see tailored jackets. You see food delivered in black bags instead of plastic containers. You see one of them toss car keys onto a desk with the lazy ease of someone who has never feared an overdue notice. You return to your seat because hunger obeys money faster than conscience. You do not yet understand that the trap works because it starts small.
Level 3. The training room. You now learn how voices get manufactured. You get moved off the open floor for advanced training because your tone is steady and your hesitation is fading. You enter a smaller room with colder air, cleaner desks, and a projector that throws fake system dashboards onto the wall. You smell coffee, printer ink, and menthol. You hear recorded calls played back like sacred texts. You learn that the owners built this place from voices first. You learn that the men in the glass office once sat where you sit now. You learn that one of them started as fake bank verification. You learn another started as fake antivirus support. You learn a third built his first savings by pretending to help people recover stolen passwords he already knew how to steal. You are not told this like a warning. You are told this like a success story. You watch training footage where an older version of the owner speaks in a cheaper headset, at a cheaper desk, with a hungrier face. You hear the same phrases you now repeat. You hear the same fake reassurance. You hear how carefully survival can grow into cruelty when money starts polishing it. You are taught accent drift. You are taught grief timing. You are taught how to sound offended on behalf of a stranger so the stranger trusts your urgency. You are taught that lonely people stay on the line longer. You are taught that shame keeps victims quiet after the damage is done. You laugh once at how blunt it all is. You stop laughing when the trainer asks you to try it live. You do it well. You leave the room with a new login, a higher commission rate, and the first clear look at the ladder above you. You used to think the system was improvised. You now see it is inherited. You are no longer doing a bad job inside a bad place. You are learning a craft built by men who turned deceit into architecture. Level 4, the owner's table. You now get close enough to see how wealth smells. You are invited upstairs after your monthly numbers break a record. You pass the glass office. You pass a private lounge. You enter a dining room with dark wood walls, leather chairs, and low amber light that makes every surface look expensive. You smell grilled meat, whiskey, and cologne sharp enough to sting behind your nose. You sit at the far end of the table. You keep your back straight. You keep your mouth careful. You watch the owners talk between bites about property, imported watches, offshore accounts, and a villa with a pool so still it reflects the sky better than water should. You hear one of them laugh about buying his mother a marble staircase because he grew up in a room with no ceiling fan. You hear another say the floor workers complain too much. You hear him say desperation is useful because it keeps turnover cheap. You hear him say everyone here chose this. You keep chewing because the steak in your mouth tastes like something you could never afford, honestly. You realize the building has two worlds inside it. You realize the floor runs on fluorescent exhaustion, while the top runs on dim light and silent money. You realize the trap is not accidental. You realize the trap is the business model. You hear your name praised. You receive a watch, a cash envelope, and a promise. You are told you can rise further if you stop thinking like an employee and start thinking like ownership. You nod because the numbers on the envelope feel heavier than the disgust in your throat. You leave the table and pass the workers below through the glass railing. You see bent shoulders. You see noodles in paper cups. You see yourself from 3 months ago. You understand something ugly then. You are not being rewarded for talent. You are being invited to become useful enough to replace your own disgust.
Level 5, the breakpoint. You now cross the line you cannot uncross. You move into closing. You stop making first contact. You take over when fear is already alive and breathing on the other end. You no longer introduce danger. You refine it. You press exactly where the person is weakest. You know the pressure points now because the system has trained your empathy into a weapon. You hear an old woman call you son by accident. You hear a ring tap against a wooden table. You hear a television murmuring in another room. You know she is alone before she says she is alone. You know she is ashamed before she tells you she does not understand computers. You know exactly how to guide her toward the transfer. You do it anyway. You name it inside your head because names matter. You steal from someone who trusts your voice, and you keep going after the first silence tells you she is trying not to cry. You finish the call. You remove the headset. You look at your hands as if they belong to someone hired to wear your skin. You receive applause through the glass. You receive a bonus in cash. You receive a message from home asking if you can help pay for medicine. You send the money within minutes. You tell yourself necessity is a kind of permission. You tell yourself guilt is for people who can afford alternatives. You buy groceries for your family that same week. You carry them through your front door like proof that wrong things can still feed people. You let your mother bless you at the table. You cannot meet her eyes for long. You go back the next night because the system has learned your price. You go back because you have learned it too. Level 6, the inner circle. You now see how cleverly the machine protects itself. You receive access to files, internal recordings, payment routes, burner identities, and complaint logs. You descend into archive rooms that smell like dust, mold, overheated servers, and old paper. You watch assistants clean trails before regulators can follow them. You watch fake compliance teams answer legal notices with delay, confusion, and polished lies. You sit in on private meetings. You hear the owners explain how to insulate themselves. You hear them say the floor workers carry the risk because floor workers touch the calls. You hear them say managers are useful because managers can be blamed. You hear them say names can be changed, offices can be moved, companies can be dissolved, but hungry workers are always easy to replace. You feel your stomach tighten because you finally understand the full design. You were never climbing into freedom, you were climbing into a prettier cage. You commit another necessary wrong. You delete a complaint chain that could have exposed the pattern. You rewrite account notes to make coerced transfers look voluntary. You send one frightened coworker home after he starts asking too many questions, knowing he will either stay quiet or disappear from the schedule forever. You notice the owners trust nobody. You notice they keep separate phones, separate apartments, separate passports. You notice they never speak plainly near windows. You notice every luxury item around them is bought with the paranoia of men who know the floor beneath them is built from voices that can turn into evidence. You remember the noodle cup. You remember the burnt sugar smell. You remember how small your need once felt. You look at your own office now and understand that the distance between desperation and corruption is shorter than any honest person wants to believe. You are finally close enough to power to see its fear. You are also close enough to hear that someone, somewhere, is already listening. Level 7, the hunt. You now hear law enforcement in the static. You notice the first signs and fragments. You hear a target account mention an investigator before the line cuts. You see unusual subpoenas forwarded to legal. You watch two owners stop using the company Wi-Fi overnight. You hear one word repeated in private rooms with the same tightness people use around illness. FBI. You pretend not to react. You keep your face flat. You keep your hands steady on the keyboard while your pulse starts beating against your collar. You watch the building tighten around itself. You see hard drives swapped. You see storage rooms cleared. You see offshore transfers accelerated. You work workers on the floor given new scripts and older names, as if a fresh lie could bury an old one fast enough. You learn the ugliest rule this late because the ugliest rules stay hidden until panic makes them useful. You learn the owners already prepared a sacrifice list. You learn your name is safer than some and weaker than others. You learn the newest workers will burn first. You learn middle managers will burn second. You learn the men in tailored jackets still believe distance, lawyers, and money will move faster than handcuffs. You stay late in the office and hear shredders running behind locked doors. You smell hot paper and plastic dust. You see one owner load watches, cash, and passports into a soft leather bag while telling the room to remain calm. You remember him laughing over steak. You remember him saying, "Everyone here chose this." You finally see the truth in full. You never belonged to the winners. You only worked close enough to mistake their table for your future. You consider running. You consider talking. You consider silence. You discover fear sounds the same in every language, including your own. Level 8, the raid. You now watch the whole structure collapse in one morning. You arrive before sunrise to a parking lot brighter than usual. You see unmarked vehicles. You see dark jackets. You see agents moving with the kind of calm that means the decision was made long before today. You hear no shouting at first. You hear only radios, heavy doors, and the sharp metallic click of a building losing control of itself. You freeze in the lobby with your ID badge still warm against your chest. You smell rain blowing in from the open entrance. You smell burnt circuitry from a server room somebody tried to wipe too late. You look upstairs and see the glass office full of motion, then no motion, then hands where expensive cuffs and watches used to flash. You watch one owner try to speak like a businessman. You watch another try to speak like a victim. You watch a third lower his eyes and say nothing, because silence is the last skill the system taught him well. You understand with a strange emptiness that every clever trick in the building was designed for delay, not escape. You see workers crying. You see one faint near the elevators. You see boxes carried out. You see monitors go black one row at a time. You see the floor where you learn to weaponize kindness, standing under daylight for the first time, stripped of its glow, ugly and small. You are questioned for hours. You answer some things. You leave some things unsaid. You hear your own voice in recordings played back across a metal table, and it sounds less like you than any stranger ever has. You walk out after dark into wet air and streetlight reflection. You turn once to look at the building. The sign is still lit. The inside is dead. You spent years believing the system was untouchable. You now see how quickly an empire of voices becomes evidence. Level 9, the last desk. You now return in memory to where it started. You sit in a smaller room somewhere else, somewhere quieter, with no headset and no script in front of you. You still wake before dawn some mornings because your body remembers the shift, even when the building is gone. You still hear fragments of old calls when the room gets too silent. You still pause at the smell of instant noodles. You think of the owners often. You think of the cars, the villas, the watches, the careful speeches, the polished lies. You think of how all that luxury rested on workers too broke to refuse and victims too frightened to fight quickly. You think of how cleverly the trap was built by men who once wore the same cheap headsets and learned step by step how to climb by turning guilt into technique. You understand the last cruelty now. You understand the system did not only steal money. You understand the system stole language. You can no longer hear patience without wondering what it hides. You can no longer hear concern without checking for the hook underneath it. You remember level 1 with awful clarity. You remember the styrofoam cup warming your palm. You remember the burnt sugar smell in the walls. You remember believing the headset was just a tool. You know now the smell was never sugar. You know now it was plastic, overheated wires, and the first warning burning right in front of you. You reached the top just long enough to see what it cost. You watched the owners fall. You watched the office die. You kept your freedom, if this hollow version of freedom still counts. You still carry the voices. You left the building. You never left that desk.